Hey, fellow scale model makers! After having struggled building Kinetic's 148 A6 Intruder, I figured Tamiya's 148 F-4B could make up for that. Curious if it does? First up is setting the project's goal. What should the end result be looking like? Just like with the A6, once more I'd like to go for the sea and salt struck weathering. Parked on the deck, wings extended, pilots used, flaps drooping, oils dripping, cockpit open and ladder extended. Surely the Sundowners scheme is the most appealing to me. Going that way will mean to override the Tamiya's directions to build the Sundowners bird into a freshly repainted one. And have all stencils applied. Yeah. Let's step into the cockpit. Having decided on open canopies, I will put some extra effort in the cockpit. Personally, I feel like the level of detail out of the box is sufficient for hand painting and improving my skills in that area. Inspired by fellow YouTubers, I'm opting for some additional manual labor on the green metallic anodized band in the seat, as well as customizing the headrest with some shrink film. As you can see, the crew goes in and Edward F4 seatbelt steel set is added to the party. All in all, painting and building the cockpit is pretty straightforward and requires time, effort and some opticals in my case. Next up is fuselage assembly. Bring out your drill bit set if you want to fit your tanks and weapons later on. No less than 22 holes needed to be drilled. No real concerns here. Tamiya has all pre-drilled for you. It is merely a matter of piercing through. Having said that, the engineering of this kit is phenomenal, especially compared with the previous build I did. Keep on test fitting though, mistakes are easily made. Before assembly, I am detailing the inner parts of the nose wheel bay. Installing the engines requires some cutting, but it is a foolproof fit. Aiming for open canopies, the closed one that comes with the kit gives perfect protection in the next phase of the process. Just glue it on with some micro crystal clear and you're good to go. For the first time I followed up on Tamiya's instructions on using their spray cans specifically for the fuselage. Next time I will be working around them. Having primed and mottled the plane first, those spray cans are only beneficial for spraying large areas in a monotonous way. I feel like having no control over adding to the model's identity. And why Tamiya advises their Italian red spray can for some minor details is a riddle to me. Rants aside, I enjoy building up the paintwork making use of my airbrush. Filling the mottling with various mixes of MRP 98 and 99 and then highlighting some panels. Let's have that dried and move over to the weaponry now. Amazed by Tamiya's multi-parts missile design and how well they fit too, creating them took only some patience and goggles. Once done, they are pretty well detailed with each pero having 17 decals. I finished off both missiles and pylons with some light weathering using MIG Black Wash. Whilst the fuselage is still drying, I proceed on some other small parts, preparing them for final assembly. It may have been 40 years ago I built my previous Phantom, a Matchbox one for sure. Probably I used 11 and 53 for its heat shielding back then. This time I'm going to town to make the exhaust stand out as it should. Starting with an Alclad II gloss prime black coat, I deploy a range of my metallic paints as well as some clear blue. Pretty pleased with the results. Some first decals were already applied in the cockpit and crew helmets. With the fuselage and tail dried and gloss coated, it is now time for a real test with the biggest decal on the sheets. Warmed up front about the thickness, having them sinked in, clearly is the biggest struggle on this kit. Especially the tail requires a lot of attention, effort and final touch-ups. At the end of this clip you can judge for yourself. The decals which failed to sink into the panel lines, I decided to carefully cut in with a knife and some more microsol and coat it all off with a semi-gloss. Next I'm using the Abteilung Sepia oil paint to wash the fuselage. And after that I come back with some post shading, aiming for the real worn look I'm after. After I airbrush some rusty stripes on the panel lines and a heavily diluted light Gull grey, I realized that I may have overdone it a bit. Especially the walkways are hardly visible. So out come the sanders. A bit concerned about the effects of sanding back. I find it really helps out in many ways. Not only does it add to the realistic effects I was after, it also seems to carry a film of some of the decals is less visible. By now most of the detailed parts are looking at me, asking if they can be fitted too. The hardest work, painting and weathering, has been done, and it is time to wrap this up. Don't be too hasty in this stage though, it's easy to make mistakes while seeing the finish line. Whilst dry fitting I noticed myself inserting the nose wheel backwards. Hooray for dry fitting, I guess. Thank you all for watching. Although it took me quite some time, I really enjoyed this build. Surely it made up for my previous A6 build. Maybe I inspired you, or maybe you have feedback. Please consider giving a thumbs up or reach out in the chat. Meanwhile, I'm taking off and signing out.